hard to believe that just like that, tax time's upon us and we're halfway through the year. The year started off a little bit indifferent. January and February were pretty quiet on the sales side. We really saw investor activity virtually disappear from the sales market. However, now with the election underway, there's a little bit more certainty in the market. Things like negative gearing, capital gains discounts, all of those things have stayed in place. And combined with this, we've just had interest rates drop to record lows, and there's certainly some good deals out there for investors looking to buy at the moment. And with a lot of properties now returning well over 5% net, it's becoming very appealing. One of the standouts for the Cairns market this year has been the rental market. So we've brought Nicole in from our rentals team today to have a little bit of a chat to us about the rental market and what's happening here in Cairns in that regard. We were chatting earlier, Nick, and you were pretty much saying it's impossible to really gauge the rental market and give it a percentage increase on what has happened in the last 12 months. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight in that?
Yeah, and it is impossible to gauge it to an exact percentage of how much the rental market's increased. You know, there's companies out there like Hare & Todd White who do their best to report on a figure, and I know that they've thrown a 5% figure out there, but it's actually impossible to tell because in rentals we don't report figures like you do in sales.
I guess what you're saying that is with the sales market, when something sells, it either gets reported by the agent as to what the property exactly sold for and how many days that property was on the market, or if the agent doesn't actually disclose the price, it does get churned through the council records and eventually updates the websites.
Exactly, and in rentals, if we don't disclose a price, there's no checking system, so it never gets disclosed. Equally, we've got a lot of landlords who privately manage their properties, so there's no way of knowing what those rents are doing. Lease increases don't get recorded anywhere, and just little things like that. And in particular, if we rent properties off market, we don't publicise that on realestate.com or through council records, so there's really no accurate way of knowing a percentage of how much the rental market has increased, but I guess we just know with confidence what's happening in our office and what's happening with our portfolio in terms of increases. So.
Can you give us some recent examples maybe of some properties you've rented, that what those prices have done in the last 12 months?
Just out of ease, we might go Menora,
Yeah.
townhouses, apples and apples. In Menora in particular, probably going back 12 months ago, we were achieving around that 250 to 270 mark for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom townhouse. In recent times, we've had a couple of tenants vacate and then become available, so it's been a really good indicator for us to put comparable properties on the market all at the same time, just to see where the rental market is. So we've been achieving north of 300 per week, which is a really good increase.
Which that's like a 10% increase in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Has that been similar for houses in Cairns as well? Are you seeing that sort of rental increase across the board, or is it just selective suburbs?
Absolutely, and I think it's really important as well to consider with rental increases, if you've got a phenomenal tenant in place, it's not always worth increasing the rent to market rent, but when certainly a tenant moves out, that market rent is,
It's always that balancing act, I guess, of keeping your tenants happy while still making sure you are getting a premium rent for your property and getting the best return.
Absolutely, yeah. But going back to those Menora townhouses, you know, we saw multiple applications on all of them. They all rented within 1 to 2 weeks, and that gave us a really good indicator that we felt confident in where that market had increased to.
It is interesting, like, I think investors are very quickly to forget just how much a small rent increase actually multiplies throughout the year.
Yeah, well, $10 a week is $520 a year, and you start talking about $50 per week rental increases, you start to cover your expenses pretty quickly.
Like, $50 rent increase, that's $2,500 a year, that's your council rates paid for. So I guess it is worth, if you do have a rental property or looking at buying, to really track where that rental market is at the moment to make sure you are getting a fair rent for your property. Even if you have had a great tenant in place, you still want to make sure you're getting a fair rental price. Yeah. The tenant's not going to vacate if you put the rent back up to market value. Yeah. They're going to stay and they're going to look around at what else is available.
I think you talk about a fair rental price, and I think that's a really good word to use and a good terminology, because as investors we have expenses as well, and what we're seeing in the current Cairns rental market is it's a tight rental market. So vacancies sit around, just above the 1% mark. And certainly what we're hoping people are doing is just making sure that they're getting a fair rent, which enables them to hold on to their investment properties longer, which eventually is going to mean more stock and alleviate the sort of stress that we're having at the moment.
Something that's been really interesting in the last couple of weeks, both the Cairns Post and Tropic Now have put out articles that it's now cheaper to own property in a lot of areas in Cairns versus rent. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it is. And like anything, supply and demand, when there's not a lot of supply on the rental market, prices go up because there's a lot of competition for it. But certainly, no, we're seeing, a lot of people say that it's costing them more to rent than it would to own. But I guess it comes back to the banks and it's a lending thing.
And that's sort of, it's creating that market equilibrium. Like, sale prices really haven't moved too much in the last 5 years, but rents have been climbing up and up. And as that gap between the cost of ownership versus the cost of renting grows and grows, we are seeing a lot of first home buyers jumping into the market because it is a more affordable option.
Yeah. And when I talk about rental demand, I guess we don't do a lot of reporting on the rental market. To give you a bit of a guide, in the last 30 days alone, our office has answered 1,680 rental inquiries, and we haven't had that much available. So just to give you a guide on how much demand there is, the girls have processed well over 100 applications. So it's a busy time for us in rentals, and it just comes back to us needing more stock.
No, it is the challenge, like we say, sort of supply and demand. It's what drives any market, and as that demand for rentals starts to get to a crazy sort of point, I think we will start seeing some of that flowing back into sales and pushing sale prices up into the future.
Hopefully.
I guess the other thing, Nick, is if you are looking at buying an investment property in Cairns, what's some of the factors that you think are really important to really make sure you're getting that best rent and the best returns into the future?
Yeah, I guess it's really important on who your agent is. Like I said, it's pretty hard to report or gauge what the rental market's doing. We do manage quite a large portfolio, so we know where the inquiries sit. We manage a really good tenancy database, so before we ever list a property online, when we're gauging sort of where that rent needs to be, we're looking at how many potential tenants there are that we can divert to that property without even having to advertise it. Every time.
Phone never stops ringing, but that's all right.
Is what it is.
So you're actively looking after your tenants and chasing those tenants and being proactive when it comes to marketing tenants. You're not just putting it onto realestate.com and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
We are, and we also run off an incredible database program that matches tenants or prospective tenants to properties, which takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and we can get really quite specific with it. So yeah, I know as a matter of fact, anything sort of within that 4870 postcode or around that 10 kilometres to the city has become really popular just because of traffic congestion. As you know, there's not really an overly good solution to it just yet.
It's interesting when you talk sort of that 10 kilometre diameter circumference from the city. We're seeing the same sort of thing in sale prices as well. Like, you look at what properties in Westcourt are selling for, and they're all selling sort of around that 400,000 for 30, 40-year-old properties, and then you look down like Edmonton and you can buy a brand new house down there for 380.
Yeah.
So people really are looking to pay that premium, both from a sales perspective to be close to the city, and I guess from a rentals perspective.
Definitely, and like you say, supply and demand, that's something that we look very closely at when we're putting a rental on the market. I did an appraisal for you the other day in Edge Hill, and there were only 4 2-bedroom units in the whole suburb. So yeah, supply and demand, and you go down the south sides just for example, and there's a lot more supply available down there, so you're not getting as many choice out of the applicants and things like that. So it's important when you are looking to buy an investment property to have a look at what's available online, and if there's an abundance of stock, you're going to be in competition, which doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be getting the best rent. So it's something to look at from a sales aspect. Is just something that easy that you can do from home is jump on realestate.com and do your own research first.
Well, I think we might leave it there, but thank you very much for Nick for jumping in today and giving us your little insights on the rental market. It's certainly an exciting market up here in Cairns at the moment, with interest rates dropping, like I said, rental prices increasing, certainly creating some really good opportunities. If you are looking at buying, selling, renting in Cairns, get in touch with our office. We always would love to help, and hopefully, help you find that next property. If you are looking at renting, help you find a fantastic tenant, or help in any way we can. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a great day.
See you later.
No, but one take. Actually, leading up to the election, there was a lot of uncertainty.
Finally had to be quiet.
Okay, let's go again.
No.
Just like that, we're halfway through the year, and if you're like me, you're probably scratching your head. Dude, I've got one more take, and then this isn't going to happen. Probably scratching your head, wondering where the first...